And that music, to be honest with you, is a perfect introduction to our topic. He is a senior partner of Levin Papantonio, one of the country's largest plaintiffs' law firms. And Mike Papantonio heads the PAC, taking on big pharma, tobacco, weapons manufacturers, the auto industry, and now human trafficking. He bases his novels on his own cases, which have been extraordinary. And he also is, we're talking about a business, a $150 billion industry, and growing. And there's a hint of a test connected to it. So comes Mike's latest thriller, Inhuman Trafficking. Now, Mike also hosts this nationally syndicated TV show called America's Lawyer. Mike, nice to have you with us on the show.
Thank you, Mary Jane. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So what's this test in Virginia that's coming up?
Well, you've got the major center of this litigation right now is going to be Ohio, actually, because...
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's the only way you can bring to bear any kind of really impact on something this big is you've got to find a jurisdiction where you can centralize all of the cases. For example, all the way back to tobacco, that's what we did. The opioid litigation was launched by our firm. You have to have that central place where all the dispositive decisions are made about a particular case. So right now, that's the focus because they have such a huge problem with trafficking up there. You'd be surprised.
In Ohio, really?
Yeah, you'd be so surprised at the jurisdictions that you would not think is really a big issue, but that's one of them.
I mean, you think mostly, the bigger cities, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, those kinds of things. And here, Ohio.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
What ends up happening if you were, for example, to take the type of trafficking that takes place by the trucking industry, it originates in L.A., and it makes its way, they'll put, 10 girls in back of a semi, and each one has their own room. They leave from L.A., and they make their trip across the United States, I-10 or one of the big corridors. And all along the way, what they're doing is they're calling truck stops, and they're saying, we're going to be there tomorrow, and the people listening understand kind of what that code is. They know what the truck stops are most likely to allow them to pull in and have these awful people come in and have sex with these girls that are typically underage and then leave. So you are right. The big cities is where it originates: Miami, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago. But ultimately, everybody's affected by it, Mary Jane. There are really no bounds here.
Who are these sycophants who want to have sex in the back of a truck with a teenage girl?
Yeah, well, it's worse than that, Mary Jane. What's worse about it is there's no acknowledgement that a lot of this comes from Wall Street. A lot of these businesses can't operate without money that's loaned to them by finance groups out of Wall Street, out of Europe. Best example I can give you is something that was called MindGeek. It was in Canada. It still is. It's still flourishing. And the only reason they're flourishing is because of the money that they get from Wall Street. But here's what they do. They're familiar with who all the traffickers are. So they'll make a telephone call to a trafficker and say, we really could use some video of underage girls being raped in a hotel room because we can distribute that and make a lot of money. So they call traffickers. It's like a Rolodex of traffickers. They know who to contact. But the worst thing about this is that this is a company that was under investigation by the Canadian Parliament. While they were under investigation, they ran out of money. So Wall Street, knowing that they're under investigation, knowing what the conduct is, came in with money and said, look, we're going to bail you.
You got to be kidding.
No, we're going to bail you out to the tune of almost $700 million.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. So I think that's the thing that strikes me about this. When we've done virtually every kind of major litigation, and we're just now kind of trying to finalize the opioid litigation. But out of this, when I was first asked to get involved, it was a small group of lawyers that they had small shops, and they said, Mike, you need to jump in and do something. But I was almost I was almost disbelieving their stories until we actually did our own investigations and found out how bad it is. I hired a lawyer who had been trafficked when she was 14 years old and had escaped trafficking by the time she was 17, went on to get her MBA, went on to get her JD to practice law. And when I listen to the stories firsthand, it's you listen to it, you go, that just can't be. But unfortunately, it is. It is a race to the bottom in so many ways.
Yeah, it sounds, we're in 2021, and this kind of thing is happening. I mean, where do they pick up these girls on the streets? Where are they coming from?
A lot of different. The book, for example, it begins with one of the cases that we were involved with, where they were bringing in H-2B workers from the Ukraine, and they would go over and recruit in the Ukraine, and they would say, how would you like to be in the service business, service industry? You can work in a hotel or a restaurant. And they would, of course, they need jobs, so they'd bring them to the United States, take everything away from them, their passport, their cards, anything. And then they would then say, well, okay, you can start off as a greeter in this restaurant to make it look legitimate. Within 2 weeks, the process is called a step-up, Mary Jane. And the step-up is they say to them, well, okay, you're making pretty good money. How would you like to make more money by being a hostess at the strip club? And then they pay them more money there. They don't actually get the money. They hold on to the money for their housing and their food. And then they say, after they start at the strip club, they say, well, you can make more money if you'll just get on the pole and dance on the pole. And then the next step up is, oh, by the way, you'll make more money if you'll spend a little time with Tom over here. And that's when they disappear. We don't see him anymore because Tom is a trafficker. So it's a process that repeats itself every day, all over this country. And unfortunately, corporate media is unequipped to do it. Investigative journalism is all but dead in corporate media. A lot of the people involved, the hotels and the financiers, they do advertising for corporate media, so they're a little slow to tell the stories. And regulators, forget it. The Department of Justice, they'll do nothing because it's not low-hanging fruit. They would rather go after the most inane kind of problems rather than paying attention to serious problems. So,
how has it grown? There's always been this kind of thing, we know. But it's a $150 million industry. Is that every year?
Oh, no. It's a $42 billion industry, Mary Jane. It's $42 billion industry. Every year it generates $42 billion.
Holy, well, no wonder it's popular with the people who are sick, because it's money. It's all bottom line money. They don't care about people or lives.
Absolutely the truth. And, and so we can do nothing. We can say this doesn't affect me until it affects your neighbor, until it affects your family. And we want to think that we're above all of that. The girl that I just explained, the lawyer that I hired, is a brilliant lawyer, knows more about trafficking than anybody that you'll ever meet. She was a girl next door. I mean, she was upper middle class. That story has it repeats itself 1,000 times a day, every day across this country.
So how did she get involved? Well,
it's called a Romeo routine. And what they do is they'll send somebody to a school or some place where she might be. With her, I think it was one of the social organizations that she was in, and the Romeo's older and, entices them to come with them, to run away with them, and everything's going to be great. They're going to marry him, and life's going to be good. And when you're 14 or 15, you're impressionable. And they have it down to a really good science. I mean, just extraordinary science. It's because you're dealing with sociopaths. If you look at DSM-5 or DSM-4 on psychological analysis, they'll check every blank on just write down the list of what a sociopath is.
They have no feeling, right?
Zero feeling. Most of them have done it. A lot of them started out, they were trafficked. Not unusual for the Romeo who goes after the young girl that they were trafficked when they were younger. And so there's all kinds of these scams and unfortunately people, you'll never find this in corporate media trying to read about it. And I think the advantage to a book like this is this is what we do every day. The last book was called Law and Addiction. That was at the beginning of the opioid lawsuit that we handled, and most of the information that came out of there only came out because of the lawsuit, and we began feeding the Washington Post with all that information, and they did just an extraordinary job uncovering the truth. But had we not started, had we not taken that first step and say we can take this on, nothing would have happened. It's just the old notion of, evil prevails when good people choose to do nothing, right?
It's amazing. I mean, in 2020, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children reported over 17,000 reports of possible child sex trafficking, but nobody did anything about it?
Well, look, here's the problem. A lot of times the girl who's trafficked ends up getting caught up in a system that the law enforcement doesn't understand. It's not that law enforcement wants to perpetuate it. It's they don't even understand what to do when they pick up a young girl that appears to be working for a pimp. They're not working for a pimp. They're working for a larger organization most of the time. And they end up charging that girl and not doing their job to look behind the scenes and figure out what's the root of the problem. And it's not, again, I choose to think that they don't do that, on purpose. They do it out of ignorance. The law enforcement is not equipped to do this kind of thing, and because we haven't trained them well enough.
So, what happens to these 17,000 girls a year? We're talking almost a year.
Yeah.
Do they just disappear after a while? They do away with them? What do they do?
5 years is what the typical trafficked girl will live, and most of them don't get out of it. Even if they get out, they end up they're so used to the lifestyle, the drug style, the drug culture, all the parts of it, the pornography culture. They end up staying there, but they live. A trafficked girl will not live more than 5 to 7 years. Most of the time, it'll end up with suicide, a homicide, drug overdose, a sexual transmitted disease that ends up killing them. So it's
where are the parents of these girls?
Well, I mean, the parents. It's not. If you really analyze it, most of the time, the parents aren't really. They're not tuned into what's going on with the child. This is with somebody's trafficked, upper middle class, type of setting. It's almost without question. The parent knows very little about what the daughter is doing, what the child's doing, and it takes work. I mean, we've all raised. A lot of people listening to this will have raised teenage girls. And there is, or teenage boys, there's just a time that they go through that is so awkward and it's so unsure. And the people that do this understand it very well. They are experts in how to get that disaffected child who's not happy in school, doesn't like her parents, believes she's victimized all the time. That's a classic kind of setting. But there's a whole different part of it, Mary Jane. It's not just the individuals. It's this, for example, it's such a broad expanse of how they go about doing this, like the Ukraine issue, where they send over people who are recruiters. It looks like it's a job fair of sorts. They get them to the United States, and then it's over. Or they come in from right now. The immigration issues on the border are horrendous. The number of those people number of those kids that end up being trafficked is, why the media doesn't talk about it, I have no idea. Maybe it's political ideology that, this is maybe a bad reflection on Biden, and who knows? But it's going on. We know it for a fact.
But it's been going on for a long time, right?
Oh, of course it has. Of course it is. Of course it is. But the more you bring over that there's no oversight, the worse the problem is. A lot of them end up getting across the border here and end up in all parts of Europe or Dubai or the Middle East, and they're sold like cattle.
So, but what can we do? I mean, they're coming over the border by the thousands. How does one even keep track?
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? I mean, there is no uh, we look, we approach the immigration problem as we should, with compassion, but we don't look at it realistically. Realistically, what's happening is too ugly even for the media to talk about. And the media may have an agenda. They didn't want to offend Trump, or now they don't want to offend Biden. And I mean, it's just part of it. They're bringing them in from Argentina, Venezuela, all over the South America, and then they can't find them. They can't find them. Literally can't find them.
So who do we go after?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, it's fairly ubiquitous. You've got cartels now that are, this is big money. The cartels are bringing them in, and, they're separating from the family. The cartels they know where to sell people, and they know the countries they can sell people, and they know how to transport them. And you may recall there was a time when Atlanta Airport, I don't know last time you've been to Atlanta, but the Atlanta Airport was a hub for all that. You see, now they're advertising. You'll get on one of the trams and they'll talk about, be cautious of human trafficking. Well, the truth is, Atlanta knew what was going on. Atlanta Airport knew exactly what was happening. The hotels there knew exactly what was going on. They would put out, to the real, just awful perverts, they would send out messages. We're going to have 12 girls at the Marriott or wherever it is. They're going to be here for a week, and people would fly in from all over the world to that central hub in Atlanta, have sex with these people, and then leave. And so the airport industry knew exactly what was happening. It wasn't just happening in Atlanta. It was happening in every major airport in the country. So now, in order to save face, in order to avoid being sued, they think it's a protection to say, hey, you really need to be cautious of what's going on around you. You need to pay attention as trafficking taking place.
Yeah, but the thing is, I'm a flyer, and I'm in the Atlanta airport or any other airport for that matter, and this trafficking is going on. First of all, I probably wouldn't even recognize it the way they do it. Sounds like they're very good at what they do.
Yeah.
And the other is, even if I did understand it or recognize it, what do I do?
Well, now they're responsive enough to where you can go to security, and they'll at least pay lip service to trying to figure out what's going on. I don't know how successful that is. If we looked at what their success rate is in finding traffickers, a lot of this, Mary Jane, is show. Okay, the hotels now have their show. The show is this. They've got a standards manual that directs them what to look for with trafficking. For example, these girls that I was telling you about that MindGeek or these folks were dealing with. Look, 5 girls check into a suite at a major hotel, and they're there for 2 weeks. And they're bringing in cameras, and they're bringing in lights, and these girls are walking all over the premises barely clothed. I mean, that hotel knows what's going on. So do we just say, well, it's okay, it's not their fault? It is their fault. They've become a mechanism to allow it to happen. And they don't want to turn the business away because that's money to them.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate.
But, Mike, let's be honest. Is there any way out of this? Is there anybody? There's no one thing to go after. So
well, there is. There is. And here's the failure. This is, unfortunately, the failure of our system in the U.S. If a person is in a criminal, let's say criminal is the CEO of a major finance company. He doesn't look like a criminal. He's dressed up in a nice suit. He has a Rolex watch and has a Bentley outside and has his MBA from Harvard or Yale. We don't look at that person as a criminal. Mm-hmm. We don't understand that they absolutely know what's going on in their organization. We do look at a kid who looks like a criminal. He's on the street corner with a hoodie on selling 3 ounces of marijuana. 10 times he ends up, life in prison. So we first of all have to admit that our culture's upside down in how we regard criminal activity. Who are they? Who are these people that do this kind of thing, So, that's a big jump. I mean, how do we it's across the board, Mary Jane. How did we allow CEOs of major drug companies to kill 150 people a day, which they're still doing with opioids. How do we not look at that as manslaughter? Why is it that we don't put them in prison, you see? Because they work for a corporation? Well, a corporation in the United States now is regarded as a person. If a person does that type of thing, we put them in prison. So we have to perp walk some folks in order to get somebody's attention. And we're not willing to do that. I've not in my lifetime. I don't know, at least my adult life. I don't know we've ever had an attorney general that's had the courage to do that kind of thing, because they don't want to rock the boat too much with the established corporate, the whole corporate setup.
I get the feeling it's never going to go away.
Well, it may not. It's it's been around for an awful long time. People ask me sometimes. They say, "Well, Mike, at the end of the day, if you do succeed and in some of these cases, it doesn't solve the problem forever." And
it's too big.
Well, okay, but my answer to that, Mary Jane, is at least I can do what I can do while I'm here. Okay?
Yeah.
It's up to somebody else after that. It's up to the young lawyers who come after me to perpetuate that and to say, this is important. I need to do something.
Well, Mike, I'm so glad that you're at least taking it on. And in the book, In Human Trafficking, you really get into a lot of details, which is absolutely phenomenal, by the way. And I thank you for what you're doing. We appreciate what you're doing and trying to do and trying to get the word out there so we all understand.
That's the beginning, isn't it? That we understand it.
It is. And for people not to sit by and let it happen. You got to do something about it. Even if it's a little piece. If a whole bunch of people have a little piece of the action, maybe we can stop some of it anyway.
Absolutely. It all culminates to success.
Now, do you have a website, Mike?
Yeah, it's Mike Papantonio. That's the website, and that'll take you to all kinds of different parts of, this book can be found anywhere. I mean, you can find this in any bookstore, Amazon, or any of the
that's what I was just going to ask
Goodreads.
you.
I mean, any of the bookstores, you'll be able to find this book.
Terrific. Well, all I can say, Mike, is thank you for what you're doing. Please keep doing it. And, hopefully if we get the word out, maybe people will start paying attention.
Let's hope, Mary Jane.